The wind howled a mournful song across the desolate plains, a fitting soundtrack to Jedediah's solitary existence. He was a rancher, yes, but more accurately, he was a caretaker of memories. His wife, Sarah, had passed from fever 2 years prior, leaving him with only the creaking of the porch swing and the rustling of the cottonwoods for company. He wasn't a bitter man, not exactly. Just empty. Jedediah was known throughout the Spar settlements for his unwavering willingness to lend a hand. A broken wagon wheel? Jedediah would fix it. A family short on supplies? Jedediah would share what he had, even if it meant going without himself. He lived by a simple code: treat others as you wish to be treated. It was a code forged in hardship and tempered by loss. His ranch, a modest spread nestled between the foothills and the open range, was a testament to his resilience. He kept it running, not for profit, but because Sarah had loved it. The fields of wildflowers she had planted still bloomed each spring, a vibrant splash of color against the muted tones of the landscape, a constant reminder of what he had lost and what he was determined to preserve. Little did he know, this very kindness, this ingrained need to help, would soon embroil him in a situation more dangerous than any he had ever faced. A situation involving a storm, a lost child, and 70 very angry Comanche warriors. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, painting the plains in hues of orange and purple. Jedediah was tending to the small vegetable garden Sarah had started, pulling weeds and humming a tuneless melody. He found solace in the simple rhythm of the work, a connection to the earth and to her memory. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of ozone. He glanced towards the west, noticing the gathering clouds, dark and ominous. "Looks like we're in for a storm," he muttered to himself, straightening his back and wiping his brow. He hurried to secure the livestock, leading the horses into the barn and making sure the chickens were safely in their coop. The wind picked up, swirling dust devils across the yard. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a low rumble of thunder that vibrated through the ground. He was just about to head inside when the first fat raindrops began to fall. They splattered on the dry earth, turning the dust to mud. The wind howled with increasing intensity, rattling the windows of the house. He quickened his pace, reaching the porch just as the storm unleashed its full fury. Rain lashed down in sheets, obscuring everything beyond the porch railing. The thunder grew louder, closer, and the lightning illuminated the sky with blinding flashes. It was a storm unlike any he'd seen in years, a wild and untamed force of nature. And then, above the roar of the wind and the crash of thunder, he heard it. A faint, desperate sound, almost lost in the tempest. It sounded like crying. Jedediah hesitated. The storm was a maelstrom of wind and rain, a dangerous place to be venturing out into. But that cry, it tugged at something deep inside him, a primal instinct to protect the vulnerable. He couldn't ignore it. He grabbed his oilskin coat and a lantern from the porch. The lantern's flickering light barely pierced the gloom. He stepped off the porch and into the storm, the wind instantly trying to rip the lantern from his grasp. He followed the sound of the crying, his boots sinking into the muddy ground. The sound grew louder as he moved towards the creek that ran along the edge of his property. He nearly tripped over a gnarled root hidden beneath the rushing water. The creek, normally a gentle trickle, was now a raging torrent. He pressed on, his heart pounding in his chest. Finally, he saw her, huddled beneath a scraggly willow tree. Clinging to its branches for dear life was a small girl. She was soaked to the bone, her dark hair plastered to her face. She was shivering uncontrollably and sobbing quietly. Jedediah recognized her features instantly. She was Comanche. He knew he had to get her out of the storm, and fast. Her life depended on it. He waded into the creek, the icy water numbing his legs, and reached for her. The little girl flinched as Jedediah reached for her, her eyes wide with fear. He spoke softly, trying to reassure her, but she didn't seem to understand. "It's all right, little one," he said, his voice barely audible above the roar of the storm. "I'm here to help you." He gently coaxed her into his arms, and she clung to him tightly, her small body trembling against his. The current was strong, making it difficult to keep his footing. He stumbled several times, but managed to keep his grip on the girl. Finally, he reached the other side of the creek and stumbled back towards the house, the little girl nestled securely in his arms. Once inside, he wrapped her in a thick blanket and placed her near the fireplace. He quickly built up the fire, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. He rummaged through his meager supplies and found a can of peaches. He opened it and offered it to her. She looked at him hesitantly, then took a small bite. Her eyes widened, and she ate the rest of the peaches in silence. He tried to speak to her, asking her name and where she came from, but she only stared back at him, her expression blank. She spoke a few words, but they were in Comanche, a language he didn't understand. He realized she was lost and frightened, completely alone in the midst of the storm. He knew he had to do everything he could to help her. He would keep her safe, at least for tonight. As the night wore on, the storm gradually subsided, the wind dying down to a gentle whisper. The little girl, now dry and warm, had fallen asleep on a makeshift bed of blankets near the fire. Jedediah watched over her, his heart filled with a mixture of concern and tenderness. He hadn't felt this sense of purpose in a long time. He noticed she was still wearing a beaded bracelet on her left wrist. It was intricately woven with colorful beads, forming a pattern he didn't recognize. It seemed more elaborate than the simple trinkets he'd seen traded at the local trading post. He gently lifted her hand and examined it more closely. The beads were arranged in a series of symbols, almost like a story told in miniature. There was a small, stylized bird, a crescent moon, and a diamond shape that repeated several times. He wondered if it was a family heirloom, a sign of her status within the tribe, or perhaps a good luck charm. He remembered stories he'd heard about Comanche customs, about the significance they placed on symbols and adornments. It was a clue, perhaps the only one he had, to understanding who she was and where she came from. He carefully lowered her hand back onto the blanket, his mind racing. He knew he had to find her family, but he also knew that approaching a Comanche camp could be dangerous, especially for a white man. He just hoped this bracelet could help him. He had a feeling it was more important than he realized. The first rays of dawn crept through the windows, painting the room in a soft, golden light. Jedediah, who had been dozing in his chair, stirred awake. He glanced over at the little girl, who was still sleeping soundly. He quietly got up and went outside, stretching his stiff limbs. The air was crisp and clean, washed fresh by the storm. The sun was rising over the horizon, promising a beautiful day. He started a fire in the cook stove and put on a pot of coffee. As he waited for it to brew, he surveyed his surroundings. Everything seemed peaceful, serene. Little did he know that peace was about to be shattered. He poured himself a cup of coffee and walked out onto the porch, taking a deep breath of the fresh morning air. He stopped dead in his tracks. His blood ran cold. Surrounding his house, as far as the eye could see, were Comanche warriors. They were mounted on horseback, their faces grim, their weapons drawn. There were dozens of them, maybe 70 or more. They were silent, motionless, like statues carved from stone. The rising sun glinted off their spear points and the feathers in their hair. He was completely surrounded, trapped, and he knew, with a sickening certainty, that they were here for the little girl. The day he thought would be beautiful had turned into a nightmare. Jedediah stood frozen on the porch, his coffee cup slipping from his grasp and shattering on the wooden planks. The sound seemed deafening in the otherwise silent standoff. He slowly raised his hands, palms open, a gesture of peace. He knew any sudden movement could be misinterpreted, could trigger a deadly response. He had to think fast. One of the warriors, mounted on a magnificent black stallion, broke away from the group and rode forward. He was tall and powerfully built, his face etched with stern lines. He wore a headdress of eagle feathers that cascaded down his back, and his chest was bare, revealing intricate tribal tattoos. He was clearly the leader. He stopped his horse a few yards from the porch, his eyes fixed on Jedediah. They were dark and piercing, filled with a mixture of anger and suspicion. He spoke in a deep, resonant voice, his words echoing across the clearing. Jedediah didn't understand the language, but he didn't need to. The warrior's tone was unmistakable. It was a demand, an accusation, a threat. This was Chief Red Hawk, and he was not a man to be trifled with. Jedediah knew this encounter could determine his fate and the fate of the little girl sleeping inside his house. He had to choose his next words carefully. His life and hers depended on it. Taking a deep breath, Jedediah spoke slowly and deliberately, hoping to convey his sincerity. "I don't understand your words, Chief," he said, "but I mean you no harm. Your daughter, I found her in the storm last night. She was lost and scared. I only took her in to protect her from the elements." He gestured towards the house. "She is safe inside. I have not harmed her." Red Hawk's eyes narrowed, his gaze unwavering. He raised his hand, and the surrounding warriors shifted uneasily on their horses, their spears held a little tighter. The silence was deafening, broken only by the gentle creaking of the porch swing. Jedediah could feel the weight of their collective suspicion, their simmering anger. "You speak of protection," Red Hawk said, his voice now in broken English, laced with contempt. "But you are a white man. White men steal our land, kill our people. Why should I believe you?" He paused, his eyes flashing. "You have taken my daughter. That is all I need to know. Return her or face the consequences." The threat hung in the air, heavy and palpable. Jedediah knew he was walking a tightrope. One wrong step, and he would plunge into a chasm of violence. He had to convince Red Hawk that his intentions were pure, that he was not the enemy. But how? "Chief Red Hawk," Jedediah replied, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I swear to you, I have not taken your daughter. I found her. She was alone. I gave her food, a warm bed. I treated her as I would treat my own child." He paused, a wave of grief washing over him as he thought of Sarah. "I have lost my wife. I know what it is to grieve. I would never inflict that pain on another." He gestured towards the open door of the house. "Come inside. See for yourself. See that she is unharmed. See that I have given her everything I could to make her comfortable." He knew it was a gamble, inviting Red Hawk into his home. It could be seen as a sign of weakness, an opportunity to be exploited. But he had no other choice. He had to trust that Red Hawk, despite his anger and suspicion, would recognize the truth. He added, "I understand your distrust. There's been much bloodshed between our people. But I'm not like the others. I believe in peace. I believe in helping those in need. Please, Chief, believe me." He held his gaze, his eyes pleading. He hoped, with every fiber of his being, that Red Hawk would see the sincerity in his heart. The fate of both of them hung in the balance. The warriors remained unmoving, their eyes fixed on Jedediah, their expressions unreadable. Red Hawk sat silently on his horse, his face a mask of stoicism. Minutes stretched into an eternity, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Jedediah could feel the sweat trickling down his back, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he was being judged, weighed in the balance. Finally, Red Hawk dismounted. He moved with a fluid grace that belied his size, his eyes never leaving Jedediah. He gestured to two of his warriors, who immediately followed him towards the house. Jedediah held his breath, his muscles tense, ready to react to any sudden movement. As they approached the porch, he stepped aside, allowing them to pass. Red Hawk paused at the doorway, his gaze sweeping over the interior of the house. He saw the fire burning in the hearth, the blankets neatly arranged on the floor, the half-eaten can of peaches on the table. He saw the evidence of Jedediah's care. But did he believe it? That was the question that hung in the air, unanswered. The warriors flanking Red Hawk remained alert, their hands resting on their weapons, ready to defend their chief at a moment's notice. The next few moments would be crucial. Red Hawk stepped further into the room, his gaze falling upon the sleeping girl. She was curled up beneath the blankets, her face peaceful, her dark hair spread across the pillow. He approached her slowly, cautiously, as if afraid she might disappear. He knelt down beside her, his eyes filled with a tenderness that Jedediah hadn't expected. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. The little girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked up at Red Hawk, her expression confused for a moment. Then recognition dawned, and her eyes widened with relief. She scrambled out of the blankets and launched herself into Red Hawk's arms, burying her face in his chest. She began to speak rapidly in Comanche, her words tumbling over each other in her eagerness to explain. Jedediah watched, his heart pounding, unable to understand a word, but sensing that the tide was turning. The girl's reaction, her obvious affection for Red Hawk, and her frantic explanation seemed to be having an effect. But what was she saying? And would it be enough to convince Red Hawk that Jedediah was not an enemy? The answer he knew was coming. As the little girl spoke, she gestured towards Jedediah, pointing to him and then making motions of eating and sleeping. She seemed to be explaining how he had helped her, how he had given her food and shelter. Red Hawk listened intently, his expression softening with each passing moment. The anger that had been etched on his face began to fade, replaced by a look of something akin to gratitude. He held the girl close, stroking her hair, his eyes never leaving Jedediah. He seemed to be weighing the girl's words, trying to reconcile them with his own prejudices and suspicions. The two warriors who had accompanied him into the house remained tense, but even they seemed to relax slightly, their hands no longer gripping their weapons so tightly. Finally, the little girl finished speaking, her voice dropping to a whisper. Red Hawk looked at Jedediah, his eyes filled with a new understanding. He spoke a few words in Comanche to his warriors, who nodded in response. He then turned back to Jedediah, his expression transformed. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. The threat was gone, replaced by something else entirely. But what was it? Jedediah held his breath, waiting for Red Hawk to speak, to reveal the decision that would determine their fate. "You have shown me kindness," Red Hawk said, his voice low and grave. "My daughter, her name is Chayton, which means hawk in your tongue. She is very precious to me." He paused, his eyes filled with emotion. "She was lost during a raid by the Kiowa. We searched for many days, but we found no trace. We believe she was gone." He swallowed hard, struggling to maintain his composure. He looked down at Chayton, who was still clinging to him tightly. "This bracelet," he said, gently touching the beaded band on her wrist, "it is a symbol of her lineage. It marks her as the daughter of a chief. When I saw it, I knew it was her." He looked back at Jedediah, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and regret. "I misjudged you, white man. I allowed my anger and my fear to cloud my judgment. I owe you an apology." He paused, then added, "You have saved my daughter's life. That is a debt that can never be repaid." The air in the room seemed to lighten, the tension finally broken. Jedediah could breathe again. He had survived, and somehow, in the midst of this dangerous encounter, a fragile bond had been formed. "I ask only one thing," Jedediah said, his voice now filled with a newfound confidence, "that you and your people leave in peace. I want no trouble." Red Hawk nodded solemnly. "That is my intention. You have earned our respect. We will not harm you or your property." He paused, then added, "But I cannot leave without offering you something in return for your kindness." He turned to one of his warriors and spoke a few words in Comanche. The warrior nodded and disappeared outside. A few moments later, he returned, leading two magnificent horses. They were sleek and strong, their coats gleaming in the sunlight. They were clearly prized possessions. "These horses," Red Hawk said, gesturing towards them, "are a gift, a token of our gratitude. They are yours to keep." Jedediah was taken aback. Such a gift was a significant gesture, a sign of deep respect and appreciation. He hesitated, unsure whether to accept. He knew that horses were valuable, essential for survival on the plains. I don't know what to say, Chief," Jedediah stammered. "This is too much." Red Hawk smiled, a rare and genuine expression that transformed his face. "You deserve it, Jedediah. You have proven yourself to be a true friend. Accept our gift. It will be an honor." And with that, the fragile bond between the lonely rancher and the Comanche chief was strengthened, sealed with a gift of magnificent horses. But their newfound peace was about to be tested. Just as Jedediah was about to accept the horses, a piercing war cry shattered the peaceful morning. It came from the north, carried on the wind. Red Hawk stiffened, his eyes narrowing. He knew that cry. It was the Kiowa. "Trouble comes," he said grimly, his hand instinctively reaching for his spear. He turned to Jedediah. "The Kiowa are our enemies. They will try to take back Chayton. They will attack us now, while we are distracted." He barked orders to his warriors in Comanche, and they immediately began to prepare for battle. Some mounted their horses, while others took up defensive positions around the house. The atmosphere, which had been so relaxed just moments before, was now charged with tension and anticipation. Jedediah felt a surge of adrenaline. He had never been in a battle before, but he knew he couldn't just stand by and watch. These people, who had been his enemies just hours ago, were now in danger. And he, in a way, was responsible. If he hadn't sheltered Chayton, the Kiowa wouldn't be attacking. He had to do something. But what could one man do against a war party of Kiowa warriors? He looked at Red Hawk, his face grim and determined. He knew what he had to do. He had to help defend them. He had to repay Red Hawk's kindness, just as Red Hawk had repaid his. He was about to enter a battle for his life. "I know this land, Chief," Jedediah said, his voice surprisingly calm. "There's a gully to the west, hidden by those cottonwoods. It's a natural defense. If we can get some of your warriors there, we can flank the Kiowa when they attack." Red Hawk looked at him, his eyes filled with surprise. He hadn't expected Jedediah to offer his help, let alone to know the land so well. But he saw the sincerity in the rancher's eyes, the determination in his stance. He knew Jedediah was right. The gully offered a significant advantage. He quickly issued orders, sending a contingent of his warriors to the west, led by his second-in-command. He then turned back to Jedediah. "You have courage, white man," he said, a hint of respect in his voice. "Fight with us. Show us what you can do." Jedediah nodded, grabbing his rifle from inside the house. He checked the load, his hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had never fired his rifle in anger before, but he was a good shot. He knew he could hit what he aimed at. He took up a position beside Red Hawk, his rifle raised, his eyes scanning the horizon. He could hear the Kiowa war cries growing louder, closer. The attack was imminent. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He was ready to fight. He was ready to defend his home, his newfound friends, and the fragile peace they had forged. The battle was about to begin. The Kiowa warriors charged across the open plain, their horses thundering towards the house, their war cries echoing through the air. They were a fearsome sight, their faces painted with war paint, their weapons raised high. Arrows rained down, thudding into the ground and the walls of the house. Jedediah took aim, his finger tightening on the trigger. He fired, and a Kiowa warrior tumbled from his horse. He reloaded quickly, his movements practiced and efficient. He fired again, and another warrior fell. He was a surprisingly good shot, his years of hunting paying off. Red Hawk fought beside him, his spear flashing in the sunlight. He was a whirlwind of motion, deflecting arrows and striking down Kiowa warriors with deadly accuracy. The Comanche warriors fought bravely, defending their chief and their land. The battle raged on, the air filled with the sounds of war cries, gunfire, and the clash of steel. Jedediah fought with a ferocity he never knew he possessed. He was no longer just a lonely rancher. He was a defender, a warrior, fighting for something more than himself. He was fighting for Chayton, for Red Hawk, for the fragile peace they had found. He was fighting for a future he never thought possible. He and Red Hawk fought back to back, each protecting the other. The battle was intense, and it was far from over. Just when the Kiowa seemed to be gaining the upper hand, the Comanche warriors who had been sent to the gully launched their attack. They emerged from their hiding place, their war cries echoing through the air, and charged into the flank of the Kiowa war party. The Kiowa were caught completely by surprise. They had not expected an attack from that direction, and they were quickly thrown into disarray. The tide of the battle began to turn. Jedediah saw his opportunity. He rallied the remaining Comanche warriors around him and led a charge straight into the heart of the Kiowa war party. They fought with a renewed ferocity, their spirits lifted by the success of the flanking maneuver. The Kiowa, caught between two forces, began to waver. Their attack lost momentum, and they started to fall back. Red Hawk, seeing their retreat, let out a triumphant war cry and led his warriors in a final, decisive charge. The Kiowa, their morale broken, turned and fled, scattering across the plains. The battle was over. The Comanche, aided by Jedediah, had won. But the victory had come at a cost. Many warriors lay dead or wounded on the battlefield. After the battle, Red Hawk and Jedediah walked among the fallen, their faces grim. They surveyed the scene, the aftermath of the bloody conflict. The ground was littered with broken weapons, fallen horses, and the bodies of dead warriors. Red Hawk turned to Jedediah, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. "You fought bravely, Jedediah," he said, his voice low. "You saved many lives today. You have proven yourself to be a true warrior." Jedediah shook his head. "I just did what I had to do, Chief," he said. "I couldn't stand by and watch." Red Hawk placed a hand on Jedediah's shoulder, his grip firm. "You are more than just a white man, Jedediah. You are a friend. You are a brother." He paused, then added, "I want you to know you will always be welcome among my people. You can come and go as you please. You will always have a place with us." Jedediah was deeply touched by Red Hawk's words. He had never felt such a sense of belonging before. He had always been an outsider, a loner. But now, he was part of something bigger than himself. He was part of a tribe, a family. He had found a home. He looked at Red Hawk and smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you, Chief," he said. "I don't know what to say." He felt grateful. The Comanche began to gather their dead and wounded, preparing to return to their village. Red Hawk turned to Jedediah. "We must leave," he said. "The Kiowa may return." Jedediah nodded. He understood. He watched as the Comanche prepared to depart, their faces etched with sorrow and weariness. Chayton ran to Jedediah and hugged him tightly, her small arms wrapped around his legs. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. Red Hawk smiled at Jedediah and Chayton, a look of warmth and affection in his eyes. He mounted his horse and raised his hand in farewell. "Until we meet again, my brother," he said. The Comanche then rode off, disappearing over the horizon, leaving Jedediah alone once more. But he was no longer the same lonely rancher he had been before. He had found a new purpose, a new family. He had faced death and discovered a strength he never knew he possessed. He looked out at the plains, at the setting sun, and smiled. He knew that life would never be the same. He had sheltered a Comanche girl, and in doing so, he had found himself. He turned and walked back towards his house, the two magnificent horses grazing peacefully in the yard. He had a lot to look forward to. He would be leaving the ranch from time to time to be with his new family. Weeks turned into months. Jedediah kept busy on his ranch, tending to his livestock and his fields. But he never forgot the Comanche, and he often thought of Chayton and Red Hawk. He studied the Comanche language, learning new words and phrases. He wanted to be able to communicate with them, to understand their culture and their way of life. One day, as he was working in his garden, he saw a familiar figure approaching in the distance. It was Red Hawk, riding one of the magnificent horses he had given Jedediah. Jedediah's heart leaped with joy. Red Hawk dismounted and greeted Jedediah warmly, embracing him like a brother. "I have come to invite you to our village," he said. "We are holding a ceremony to honor our fallen warriors, and we would be honored if you would join us." Jedediah was thrilled by the invitation. He had been longing to visit the Comanche village, to experience their culture firsthand. "I would be honored to come, Chief," he said. "Thank you for inviting me." Red Hawk smiled. "Come, my brother," he said. "Let's ride." And together, they set off towards the Comanche village, two men from different worlds, bound together by friendship and respect. Jedediah knew he was about to embark on a new chapter in his life, a chapter filled with adventure, discovery, and the promise of a lasting peace. The Comanche village was nestled in a sheltered valley, surrounded by towering cliffs and a sparkling river. As Jedediah and Red Hawk rode into the village, they were greeted by cheers and applause. The Comanche people had heard stories of Jedediah's bravery and kindness, and they welcomed him with open arms. The ceremony to honor the fallen warriors was a solemn and moving event. Jedediah listened respectfully as the Comanche elders spoke of the sacrifices made by their people. He watched as the warriors performed traditional dances, their movements filled with grace and power. At the end of the ceremony, Red Hawk stepped forward and addressed the tribe. He spoke of Jedediah's courage, his loyalty, and his unwavering commitment to peace. He then turned to Jedediah and, with a voice filled with emotion, declared him an honorary member of the Comanche tribe. The crowd erupted in cheers, showering Jedediah with gifts and blessings. He was overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and acceptance. He had never felt so welcome, so cherished. He knew, in that moment, that he had finally found his place in the world. He was no longer just Jedediah, the lonely rancher. He was Jedediah, the Comanche warrior, a brother to all who called this valley home. He was finally home. From that day forward, Jedediah divided his time between his ranch and the Comanche village. He learned their customs, their traditions, their language. He hunted with the warriors, fished in the river, and sat around the campfire, listening to their stories. He shared his own stories with them, tales of his life as a rancher, of his love for Sarah, and of the hardships he had endured. He became a bridge between two worlds, a symbol of peace and understanding. He helped to negotiate treaties between the Comanche and the white settlers, working to ensure that both sides were treated fairly. He taught the Comanche new farming techniques, helping them to improve their crops and their livestock. He also continued to honor Sarah's memory, tending to her garden and keeping her spirit alive in his heart. He often told stories about her to Chayton, who had become like a daughter to him. He taught her how to read and write, sharing his love of books and learning. Chayton, in turn, taught him about the Comanche ways, about their respect for nature, their love of family, and their unwavering spirit. Jedediah's life was full, rich, and meaningful. He was no longer a lonely rancher, haunted by the ghosts of the past. He was a part of something bigger than himself, a part of a tribe, a family, a community. He had found his purpose, and he was finally at peace. Years passed, and Jedediah's hair turned as white as the snow-capped mountains in the distance. He was respected by both the white settlers and the Comanche people, a testament to his integrity and his unwavering commitment to peace. His ranch became a gathering place, a haven where people of different cultures could come together and share their stories. Chayton grew into a beautiful young woman, intelligent, kind, and fiercely independent. She was a skilled hunter and a gifted storyteller, carrying on the traditions of her people. She often visited Jedediah at his ranch, helping him with his chores and listening to his tales of the old days. One spring morning, as they were sitting on the porch, watching the wildflowers bloom in Sarah's garden, Chayton turned to Jedediah and smiled. "You are a good man, Jedediah," she said. "You have brought peace to our people. You are loved by all." Jedediah smiled back, his heart filled with gratitude. "I just did what I had to do, Chayton," he said. "I just tried to do what was right." He added, "Your mother would be proud of the woman you have become." He knew Sarah was looking down on him with a smile. He looked out at the horizon, at the vast expanse of the plains, and felt a sense of contentment he had never thought possible. He had come a long way from the lonely rancher he once was. He had found love, friendship, and a purpose in life. He had found his home, and he knew, in his heart, that he would never be alone again. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple, Jedediah sat on his porch, watching the two magnificent horses graze in the yard. He saw a rider approaching in the distance, silhouetted against the setting sun. As the rider drew closer, he recognized Red Hawk, his face etched with the wisdom of age, his eyes still filled with the fire of a warrior. Red Hawk dismounted and walked towards Jedediah, a warm smile on his face. "My brother," he said, embracing Jedediah warmly. "It is good to see you." "It is good to see you too, Chief," Jedediah replied, his voice filled with affection. "What brings you here?" Red Hawk gestured towards the setting sun. "I have come to watch the sunset with you, my friend," he said, "to share a moment of peace and tranquility." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun slowly disappear below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains. The air was still and quiet, filled only with the sounds of nature. Finally, Red Hawk spoke. "You have done well, Jedediah," he said. "You have brought peace to this land. You have united our people. You have made a difference." Jedediah smiled, his heart filled with gratitude. "I just did what I could, Chief," he said. "I just follow my heart." They sat in silence once more, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky. They were two men from different worlds, bound together by friendship, respect, and a shared commitment to peace. They were brothers forever linked by the events that had brought them together. Their story, a testament to the power of kindness, compassion, and the enduring spirit of the human heart. It was a story that would be told for generations to come. The end. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the distant sound of drumming from the Comanche village. Jedediah closed his eyes, listening to the music, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. He was at peace. He opened his eyes and looked at Red Hawk, his face lined with wrinkles, his hair as white as the clouds above. But his eyes still shone with the same fierce spirit, the same unwavering commitment to his people. "Thank you, my brother," Jedediah said, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for everything." Red Hawk smiled, a knowing smile that spoke volumes. "You are welcome, my friend," he said. "You are one of us now. You are Comanche." They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the stars begin to appear in the night sky. The world around them was changing, but their friendship, their bond, would endure. They had faced hardship, danger, and loss, but they had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more committed to peace. As the first rays of dawn began to peek over the horizon, Jedediah and Red Hawk stood up, their silhouettes outlined against the rising sun. They were two men from different worlds, but they were also brothers, forever bound together by the events that had brought them together. Their story, a testament to the power of kindness, compassion, and the enduring spirit of the human heart, was finally complete. It was the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a legacy of peace,